the way you actually speak to yourself inside your brain become the fact that you want to live or you would eventually live in your brain. Now, you might have said to yourself that I can't, I'm lazy, I'm stupid, or any other negative self-talk that you might be doing right now, or you might done, you know, you'll be doing tonight, or you have done the other night, the past nights, or any moment of your life. Now, I want to tell you a concept. It's a psychological concept. It is a scientific concept. It's totally backed by evidence. It's not bullshit. It's not my point of view. It's simply facts. Okay? So, the simple fact that I'm talking about is neural plasticity. Have you ever heard of it? Okay, I do not know actually what is neuroplasticity, like the term of it, the accurate term. I think it's neuroplasticity. But what happens is that you repeat an action. For example, let me give you my example to clarify this. I am left-handed, okay? I write with my left hand. So I've never tried with, writing with my right hand. So if I start to take out my pen, hold it in my right hand, and start writing it, okay? So the first, I don't know, 1,000, 10,000 letters or words would be so messed up that I won't even take a second look at it. But here's where the magic comes. When you start to write that A, B, C, D, or whatever, you start to write it enough of the times, your brain actually gets rewired in real time. It infers a pattern that this behavior, the specific behavior, is being initiated multiple times. So I need to adapt myself to get this behavior so right so that it isn't, hectic for me. It isn't hell of a task for me. So right now, writing with my right hand would be so much harder for me because to my brain, that is not actually an activity that this individual has performed over the years, over 20 years. Okay. But if I start to write my hand, write with my right hand, and then I come across a year of constant practice and consistency, and I do not give up, I would be actually much surprised of how easier it is to write. This is because the brain has rewired. Okay, so this is neuroplasticity, or I'm optimistic that this is the right term. You can just search it up, the concept that I explained to you using that one, and you can actually rewire your brain using this same method, which is also called exposure therapy in cognitive behavioral therapy. That the thing that you do not want to do when you're constantly exposed to it, you actually get much better at it facing your fears or anything that you do not want to do or it is outside of your comfort zone. You eventually get better at it. Now, the thing is that when you do this negative self talk, at the first moments, it is kind of like, a facade that you have put over yourself, and your brain knows that this is bullshit. It isn't true. For example, if I say to myself that I'm shit at making content, I'm just a loser. I'm a loser. I'm talking about myself. I'm a loser. So maybe for the first days or weeks, my brain would say, no, that's not actually true. He's just reinforcing that point of view, but that's not actually true. But extended over a long period enough, you know, a long enough period over the years or decades. Now imagine a week of me saying that I am a loser would not have no effect or minimal effect on my behavior or routine or my life philosophy. But if I say it over a decade, that actually becomes a fact for me. It's because when I say I am a loser, I know that what losers do, losers don't try, losers quit. So I would say, okay, eventually I would be a loser. So what's the point of even trying? So I would quit. And guess what? The result will be that I would be a loser. Now, you might think that, okay, this is some crap that we've already heard, manifestation and some bullshit. But this is sort of separate of what I'm talking about. The manifestation that you believed in, it is either, I don't know, a fourth or fifth dimension construct, or is it your spiritual being, or is it just chances of God helping you? I don't know. But the thing I know about neuroplasticity being similar but not the same is that your brain actually rewires. That is primitive biological source code speaking to your behavior, which is manifested in the real world, right? So if I'm saying I'm a loser, that is me changing my biology. And then it would also influence my actions in the real world, where I would act like a loser and not like a winner, or not even a guy who tries something and you just constantly tries until he gets it right. So eventually, I would be a loser, right? Now for the section two, I would say I would like to discuss that how it destroys your potential. Now, I want you to understand only two things that I'm going to provide you in this specific part of the video. There are only 2 points, not that much, difficult. The first one is when you initiate this negative self talk and sustain it over a long period of time, you lower your standards, your individual standards of performance. You underestimate how much you can perform. So if I can do 3 videos per week, as I'm doing currently right now, that is my optimistic schedule. But if I say, okay, I can only handle 1 video per week, right? So that would me being, getting lowered in terms of my standards and getting much less done as compared to what I could, have done in a week. So lowering your standards mean lowering your performance, and that comes to our second point, which is when you lower your standards, you have that sort of, sense of a useless being or a useless individual who cannot contribute to the society, who cannot contribute to themselves, who cannot contribute to the family, their friends, and their partners, and they would sort of have this lowered self-esteem about I do not, I'm not worth it. I do not deserve better. This deserving better. This is, I had a lot of, a different crap that you already know about, but this is obviously, this is in a different context. So when you say that I cannot do this, I cannot do this, and, just sustain it over a long period of time, that's actually the easiest way to destroy your potential, as I said in this video, because you're lowering your standards, that is affecting your self-esteem, and then you would have a much cheap personality, I would say, a much inferior version of yourself, as opposed to a growing version that would have become better over the years. Remember how you think that your teenage was cringe, your early teens? Now I can tell you that if you're 18, 19, or 20, when you were 30, you would see that your 20-year-old self is cringe, right? And that's why, because you have improved, sort of improved over the years, and you think that now I'm better, and that past version of me was just, not very good, not living up to the mark. Now, imagine a worst case scenario where you say that, okay, I'm 30, now I'm worst, but I was so good when I was 20. That's totally filled with regret. I do not know if you're going to live with this, but I'm not going to live with this eventually. So if I'm not going to live this, it's my duty to tell the younger brothers that this is not the way you live your life. I'm not being a guru. I'm not being a self-improvement, creator or an influential person, I swear. But I seriously want to get this advice out there so that it's not a moral debt to me that I realized something and I didn't share it with everyone. You know, I can exemplify this, I can explain this, I can make you understand this enough so that when you realize this, you stop doing that negative self talk and you eventually become better. You know, it's just life is just hierarchical stage. Just remember that life is all about hierarchies, nothing else. So if you're at stage one, then at stage two, then at stage three. So you would always stick at stage one if you're doing that, negative self-talk, or even go at the stage zero. Because what if it's, just destroying the curve is, the direction of the improvement is downwards rather than upwards. Okay? So shove that fact and deal with it, basically. Now, the section three is about breaking this pattern because at the end, if it doesn't have a mitigation to it, what's even the point of addressing the problem, right? So, the easiest way I can tell you to mitigate this problem is to sort of develop a unrealistic ego, a unrealistic expectation to yourself, because I can tell you right now, What you think is unrealistic is actually very, very realistic, because all of the negative self talk that you've been doing over the years, you have just destroyed your potential and you think you can only do 10%, whereas I know you can do 90%. That's the case. And so for you sitting at 10% at your maximum is 10%, and I'm demanding 80 or 90% from you. So you would say that is unrealistic, that is bullshit. Whereas I know that self negative self-talk has destroyed you over the years, and you cannot perform at anything right now. You cannot even think of winning. And that is actually kind of very sad for a man, because they are established, or they're built upon the value that they provide. They start from the zero, they have to get to the 100%. That's the only mission of the life. It could be 100% in any aspect. It could be in a religious aspect. It could be financial. It could be, relational, interpersonal. It could be anything. But you have to constantly improve yourself. If you ask me, I'm getting better every day, according to myself, at speaking at the camera, right? So if I'm speaking at the camera every day, I'm not giving up, I'll eventually get better. That's the optimistic thought. That's the optimistic reality. Reality is always optimistic. The only thing that binds you from believing that is your own negative self talk. So I don't know. You could continue this bullshit and just sort of deal with this in any other way that would be actually coping, not dealing, because you're not enough of a man that you could, stand up in the, face of the hardships of life, and you would say, okay, if I have a problem, what if instead of being, you know, the word that they call is eventually pussy, and that's actually very true. Even for me, if even today I cannot do many things, like I've been procrastinating about starting my gym, getting back into my good shape that I was before. I'm just at the rock bottom pitfall. That is the reality, but I do not constantly communicate that to myself, because if I start being, too negative towards me, I would lose that respect. I would lose that, you know, kind of what would be the right word for it? Let me guess. Uh, I guess it would be potential. I would lose that potential, to be honest, because again, I cannot emphasize this enough, bro. You're at 10%, you have to get to 90%. I'm at 10%, I have to get to 90%, or even 100%. Why hit 90 when you can hit 100? So in the ideal case scenario, you were gonna hit 100, but in realistic case, you should at least touch 90, because when you maximize a positive self-talk and minimize a negative self-talk, then everything is, inevitable. So that's not a motivational bullshit, by the way. That's actually very true. So pay attention to it and do not take this for granted. So the first point is that you have to develop a unrealistic ego that you can live up to for your entire life. Okay? Expect 90 when you're actually at 10. That is the main point. The second thing is that stop talking to yourself in a way that you would not tolerate from others. Now, if you say to yourself that you are a failure, right? You say to yourself, I'm a failure. I've done nothing. Whereas someone else says that you are a failure, that's actually a much more offensive thing. So you have to constantly, when you ever get a thought, just sit and compare that. If someone else said this to me, would I tolerate it? Would I, just bear it and just let it go? If no, you shouldn't talk to yourself like that, because your own perception about you versus you is a totally different thing. Let me explain this. My perception of me being how good of a person I am is totally different. It can be surprisingly very different as compared to what I actually am. So there are two different identities. You have to respect yourself, because you are not the same as opposed to what you think about yourself. Okay? With that note, I think that I knocked some sense into you. You had some experience, and at the end, I would just say, I understand, brother. You have gone through some embarrassment in your life, some hardships in your life, and you might be just thinking that it can't be, the situation can be lifted, it can be mitigated. I'm just a total mess. I'm not, a person or an individual, or or a misery to be caught from redemption. But let me tell you, you still have that redemption inside you that could be attained if you stop this negative self-talk and actually try to think of something, like anything, that would make you improve your life circumstances. That's all I can say. Okay. So, with that note, I think that I provided some value. I wish you the best of luck. I hope that you would start the self improvement and not be depressed and not be sad about it, but actually optimistic that, okay, if I face a failure, I would be much more lucky as compared to if I didn't face a failure, because then I would not know where I currently stand. Okay? Bye.